If you are a startup looking to grow in Cambridge, the Bradfield Centre offers a range of flexible membership packages which put you in control of your office and home working mix. There's a vibrant, collaborative atmosphere, on-site cafe, plenty of green outside space, and regular member social events. For more information, visit bradfieldcentre.com or call 01223 919 600.
Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Faye. So, James, how's your week been?
Yeah, it's been a good week. It's just kind of recovering, really, isn't it? I have to say, one thing I never really do is go back and listen to our previous episodes. And last week, what was I doing? I've suddenly started saying for sure at the end of every sentence. So,
okay, so fatal mistake, don't go back and listen. Do you remember right at the very start, I listened to every single episode because I was being a proper control freak, but time doesn't allow that. But I say, all the time. I mean, I would suggest it's Carl's fault. He needs to edit those things out.
Yeah, everything's Carl's fault. It's never us, right? Well, I don't know where this has come from. It just seems to have started to happen, so I don't know. We need to keep an eye on it.
You've developed another ism.
Yeah, exactly. So, I will try not to say that today.
For sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so this week was good. We've obviously been recording a few episodes. Part of that, we visited Forefront RF's offices, which was nice. Really interesting to see their new lab space. We held the first meeting of the reformed steering committee for the Bradfield, which was really good. We hosted a little delegation from UKTN as well, which included Russ Shaw, an old colleague of mine from my O2 days. You might know Russ, who's both an ambassador for Cambridge Tech Week, but also a founder of Tech London Advocates, which has grown into this huge global network. So that's super impressive. And it's also been a bit chaotic at base because we're in the middle of a bit of a refresh. So there's new furniture coming and going, and it's going to all look different by next week. So do come along if you haven't been in for a while, because it's going to look completely different.
Excellent, exciting times. So my week was, like you say, it was just getting back into normal after the Cambridge Tech Week stuff. So I was still doing quite a bit of Cambridge Tech Week stuff, it has to be said. Still haven't followed up with everyone I spoke to, so apologies everybody, I'll get there eventually. Then lots of client work, to be honest, kept me busy pretty much all week. I did go out. So BDO and Mishcon de Reya hosted a dinner for the finalists of the Cambridge Tech Week pitching event, but I was double booked, so I kind of did that. I went to theirs for the pre-dinner drinks and then went somewhere else for dinner.
Yeah, and on Mishcon de Reya, I just wanted to give Jeff Dragon our best wishes. He's moving on for Mishcon for a new opportunity. But so Jeff's done huge amounts of work to support startups in the Bradfield and also supported with the Trinity Bradfield Prize. So he's going to be missed, but hopefully won't be a stranger.
No, I mean, we'll see where he pops up. Do you know? Can you say?
So I do know, but I can't. Well, he's posted on LinkedIn to say that news is coming next week, so I won't spoil it for him.
Oh, okay. Well, we should wait, Jeff, to see what you're up to next. And then I had a coup on Friday because my day got cancelled. So I had a whole day with nothing in it.
Oh, how lovely.
I know. So try and get through that never-ending to-do list, to get a few bits of achievement done. So that was that.
Lovely.
So should we do the news?
Yeah, let's do that. We'll kick off with NASDAQ-quoted Symbiotic Inc., a Boston-based leader in AI-enabled robotics technology for the supply chain, has enlisted Cambridge company Niabolt, who are a pioneer of ultra-fast charging solutions, for a major product rollout. Niabolt's technology will be used in Symbiotic Symbot autonomous mobile robots, enabling improved performance and durability for Symbiotic's industry-leading warehouse automation system. The new solution has 6 times more energy capacity and is 40% lighter, and it significantly reduces the overall weight and power supply and enhances the reliability of the system by increasing the bot's windows of operability. Sai Vyakarnam, co-founder and CEO at Niabolt, said Niabolt's high-performance batteries ensure Symbiotic's autonomous robots never stop moving.
Great. So next piece of news, Cambridge startup HiVerge has clinched $5 million of seed funding to accelerate a pathfinding algorithm factory. It has been envisioned to solve a hidden yet critical business challenge, which is discovering and deploying algorithms that help organisations rapidly improve their operations at scale. Big name investors were buzzing around the company's Hive platform. Don't you love that? Buzzing around the company's Hive platform. Beautiful. Flying Fish Partners in Seattle led the seed funding round with R&D Innovation Capital and Google DeepMind chief scientist Dr. Jeff Dean among the other backers. HiVerge has an impressive founding team, including Al Hussein Fauzi, Bernardino Romero Paredes, and Hamza Fauzi. And I've got a feeling we're going to be hearing a lot more about this company in the future with the people behind it and the backers behind it too.
Lovely. And our final story is close to home. So it's now public that Cambridge tech company Gearset have graduated from the Bradfield Centre into their new headquarters on the Cambridge Science Park. Their new space is 16,000 square feet, which is double the size of the space they had with us at the Bradfield. And the opening of Gearset's new flagship office follows a year of record-breaking business milestones for the company. In 2024, Gearset experienced a 49% year-on-year revenue increase, welcoming 800 new customers, bringing their total customer account to 3,500, which includes 1,000 enterprise clients. The company, which specialises in DevOps platforms of Salesforce, operates globally, offering its solutions to thousands of customers worldwide, and it employs 309 people in the UK, with 201 of those at the new Cambridge HQ. So congratulations to Gearset.
Absolutely. It must be like a really good thing because they're graduating out of the Bradfield Centre, but also quite a sad thing because you've seen them grow and expand, haven't you?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's what we're there for, right? Is to help these companies scale and grow. So now the hard work is like to fill back the space. So
there's no shortage of people out there, is there? So it's like that's exciting in itself. Now, I've got a random question about Gearset. Do you remember? I mean, you may not know the answer to this, but listeners, if you do, please let me know. Do you remember Cows About Cambridge?
Yeah.
The big art thing that was done, I mean, probably a good few years ago now. Gearset bid for one of the cows for it to go in their new office.
Yeah, it's in their office.
Oh, so they still have it?
Yeah, it was in the Bradfield office as well.
Was it? Oh, well, I never saw that.
I'd be surprised if they're not taking it with them. But yeah, so they do have it, yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad the Cow About Cambridge is still out there in the office.
We have a giraffe as well in the atrium.
I know, I've seen that, but yours is smaller. It's not like a full-size giraffe.
All right, it's not a competition.
Okay. Oh, good God.
I'm touchy about our pretend animals.
Yes. Please, everyone, if you go in the Bradfield Centre, do acknowledge the amazing giraffe that's in there. Oh, crikey. So let's move on before we descend into utter chaos. This week's episode, James, you caught up with Shai Vyakarnam for an update.
So Shai, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. And of course, it's not the first time on the podcast either. You came on back in December to talk to us about the Cambridge History of Innovation project, which I know you have an update for us on. But this time, we're going to talk about you. So let's start with you first. So Sure. We've known each other for a good few years, but when I started to research this conversation, I had to admit, I didn't really know how you'd found your way originally to Cambridge. So why don't we wind the clock all the way back to childhood and take us through what were your passions as you were a younger person? And did you know what you wanted to do straight away? Or was your kind of early career more of a journey of discovery, so to speak?
I think journey of discovery is probably a good summary, Jim, because I was born in New Zealand. My parents were early diplomats of independent India, and they found themselves in New Zealand, and that's where I was born. And then as a result of my father's job, he was posted to various countries, went back to India for a while. Then he was sent off to Kenya, and then from there to Egypt, and then to Lebanon, and then over to the UK. And that's roughly when I was becoming a young teenager. Late teenager, early 20s. And I found myself in London in 1969, just towards the end of the swinging 60s.
I was going to say, that's a good time to hit London.
I tell you what, I had a whale of a time in London. Discovered Carnaby Street and all sorts at that time. It was fantastic. And there were all kinds of incredible influences in the UK in the early 70s. There was the music scene, of course, was fantastic. The theatre scene, the freedom fighting, struggling, the anti-Vietnam stuff was going on, anti-apartheid was going on, and all these influences were there on me. And after school, I decided that I would pursue more a business studies, management studies route. Probably wasn't clever enough to do the physics and the chemistry that is required of Cambridge, but there we are, that's what I did. But all the way through, I think I was always encouraged by my parents to do other things as well. And while my father was busy with what he was doing, my mother was a musician, played an Indian instrument called the veena, and there's a link back to Cambridge on that in due course. So, yeah, it was fantastic. And my first, what I would call entrepreneurial venture was when my dad asked me and a handful of other 8-year-olds to go off and put posters up in shop windows on what was then called Kilindini Road, and it's now President Moi Road or something like that in Mombasa, to promote the centenary celebration of Tagore, the first Nobel Prize winner of India for literature. And so that's going off and hustling shopkeepers to put stickers up at the age of 6 or 8 and just being free to roam the streets back then. Well, I don't think we could do that with children now, but back then the kids were let loose and it was fantastic. We grew up with all sorts of risks and rewards at that time.
And looking at your bio, around 1987, it describes how you spotted this opportunity to actually start to teach entrepreneurship, and you started to pull together an actual course which was adopted by Cambridge and then Reading and Cranfield and others. Indeed. So how did that come about? How did you spot the gap, the opportunity, and how did you go about pulling that together?
Yeah, 2 or 3 dots need connecting here. The first one is that at the end of my PhD at Cranfield, the last chapter, which was the PhD was on the social relevance of management education. Having done an MBA and then a PhD, I thought, what's that all about, Alfie, kind of thing. And I decided unless it had meaning and purpose, I didn't see any particular role for business schools and management schools, although a creature of one. And so that set me up thinking about this. And one of the paragraphs in my concluding chapter was, if business schools are to be relevant, they really need to embrace entrepreneurship education and do things for people who can't otherwise get to B schools because they're really very elitist institutions. So I blame my father for that lefty thinking. Okay, I've come to my senses since, but that's what it was. And around the same time, there's a wonderful faculty member at Cranfield, a gentleman called Robert Brown, and Cranfield had won a government project to do entrepreneurship education. And the Graduate Enterprise Program was born. And because I lived in Cambridge, I was asked to try and recruit Masters in Engineering Technology, MET, students and others onto that 1-week program. What I learned from that was a third piece, which was action learning, which is people learn best if they're challenged with questions. That came from yet another source. And so putting all that together, it became apparent to me that learning through case studies and through teaching is not as effective as learning through pushing people into answering questions and doing things, learning by doing. So little by little, it started to take shape in my head that actually education for entrepreneurship is more powerful than education about entrepreneurship, especially if we want things to happen. Right? And the for entrepreneurship is nudging people to take small steps, giving them the confidence and the self-belief to take the bigger steps that they need to take. So right the way through from, let's say, 3rd, 4th year, undergrad, PhD, whatever, no ideas going on, suddenly saying, okay, let's take the small steps, let's learn to pitch, let's learn to do some creativity, let's learn a bit of marketing, speak, how to talk to VCs and so on. So, oh, yeah, I can do this. And then use of vicarious learning, i.e. role models, getting the role models to come and give talks on specific topics, not just another event, but on specific topics. And so the students be like, yeah, you know what, that's quite interesting. And I can give you some examples of things that were done specifically on that. So that started to take shape in 87, but that was also the time I went up to Nottingham Trent to set up a Centre for Growing Businesses for 5 years. So the academic in me was still dominant. We trained up about a dozen PhDs from various parts of the world on entrepreneurship. Then I had a call one day from Peter Hiscox, who was then the director of the Cambridge Entrepreneurship Centre, and word had got out that I do this stuff and I live in Cambridge. And he said, would you like to come and work in Cambridge with us.
Right, okay. Let's pause that though, because obviously there's a lot to dig into at the Judge Business School.
Sure.
A couple of supplementary questions then around the work in 1987. And I think you've hinted maybe at the answer I was looking for already, but were you coming at entrepreneurship on those original courses through the lens of technology and life sciences, or were you teaching it on a much broader SME style, starting any kind of business?
Yeah, there were two dominant themes. One was, I would say, my work for about 10, 12 years, going back and forth to various countries in Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, South Africa, and so on, and groups coming from those countries and other Asian countries too. So that was all dominated by how to make the poor less poor. So what kind of entrepreneurship education do we need to achieve that? And that was because of my then doctoral supervisor, Malcolm Harper, who led me in that direction. The stuff for the UK came out of me being part of the very, very early founding group of what's now a flagship program at Cranfield called the Business Growth Program. And that was, as you say, generic SME stuff. But the startups were based around the graduate things, so university-oriented things. So that would be I would say, two streams.
Right.
One is poor, less poor. One, solve problems for the SMEs and other graduates. And it was a slow but steady transition into the deep tech stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess my second follow-up question was, what was the state of entrepreneurial education in the UK at that stage? Was there nothing there could be improved? What was this opportunity that you spotted in the market for this kind of content?
Yeah, so there was a very dominant group of academics, amazing people actually, late Alan Gibb, Sue Burley and various others, Malcolm, my supervisor and others, but they were all into SMEs, small and medium enterprises. And I remember entering those sort of debates. There was a Institute of Small Business Administration, it was called, ISBA, annual conferences. I prepared a paper for one of those conferences, I think it was Southampton round, when I said that if you talk about SMEs, that's like SME, that's like Captain Hook's right-hand man. It's an irrelevant tag. We can't be teaching stuff to SMEs. As a unit of analysis, they're an inanimate object. They're a government statistic. You have to teach the owners of SMEs, and those owners are called entrepreneurs. So if we want to address education for the owners or future owners of businesses, we need to address their needs, not their needs of some anonymous object or irrelevant statistical fact that they have 25 employees. I don't care. What is it people want to do and how are they going to do it? Why do they want to do it? Are the questions we need to ask. So I presented that paper, I think with Jane Bradford was the head of SME at NatWest Bank. She was chairing the session. And I stood up and said, this is an irrelevance to have SMEs as a tag. Still, that's the way it went.
You need a new job title, Jane, is what you were saying in that meeting.
In a way. And you know what? Back in the 80s, it was all about SMEs.
Yeah.
And of course, Thatcher had been in power already. And she was actually groundbreaking in shifting the needle for us.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I guess today you'd call that founder-led growth, right? Or founder-led businesses. But you're obviously trailblazing that back in the late 80s.
Yeah, I guess it was the case. And I had a lot of opposition to my thinking at that time from the established academic circles. This is nonsense. It could have SMEs, No. You're dealing with people's hearts and minds here.
Yeah. And obviously the big difference between an entrepreneur versus, say, a corporate role is the entrepreneur lives and breathes what they do, right? So as you say, it's all encompassing to that individual. It's not just a company and a job title, it's their entire life.
Yeah, I think what's interesting for me in the education piece, again, I'm trying to remember the name of the academic. It was a colleague at Nottingham Trent, wrote a wonderful paper that said, if the entrepreneur does not embrace formal management routines and principles, and the manager doesn't embrace entrepreneurial mentalities, both are doomed to failure. Entrepreneur is not just about creating ideas and doing the kind of the woohoo thing at pitching events.
Yeah.
It's more than that. They need a bit of discipline. Equally, if the manager just does routines and rituals, systems and processes, you kill the company without any innovation coming through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there has to be a fine balance between them.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so let's jump back we got to the point where you were having the conversation with the Judge Business School in Cambridge. So that was 2001, around that kind of time?
That's correct.
Yep.
Yeah, 2001, yeah.
So yeah, let's pick the story back up there then in terms of how that evolved into what became the Centre for Entrepreneurial Learning.
Sure. So I arrived in 2001. There's a lovely anecdote behind that as well. But we came together with a group of about 8 or 9 of us. We were above what is now Hot Numbers on Trumpington Street for those that live in Cambridge. Or it used to be Martin's Coffee Shop, the Greasy Spoon cafe that all the engineering department students used to go to. Now Hot Numbers is way more posh. But we were all crammed in there. And I think there was a lot of thinking going on about the future of entrepreneurship at Cambridge at that time. And the 3 people who were leading that discussion deeply were Peter Hiscox, Shirley Jameson, and Tim Minshall, who's now, of course, professor at the IFM, and with a best-selling book, no less. So they were wondering how to engage with Hermann Hauser. And I think it took them a while to figure out that you couldn't get a Hermann Hauser Entrepreneurship Center inside a Judge Business School. 2 names would clash, it just wouldn't make sense. So in the end, what Hermann really wanted was tech transfer. He was less willing to fund the education piece, which he thought should be the Judge Business School's priority and should be funded differently. So around that time, Hermann, Peter, Tim, etc., they all came to an agreement with the university. I don't know who was in the back rooms and higher up. That was way above my pay grade at the time. But a decision was made to set up what became Cambridge Enterprise.
Yeah, and the Hauser Forum building. Yeah.
All of that,
yeah.
And so you'll have a separate discussion about how that evolved. For us, there's a team of us. There's me, Joe Mills, who's now at Babraham, and 1 or 2 others. We was left within the Judge as the teaching and training team in the practice of enterprise. This was to me like a death sentence, having given up a professorship at Nottingham Trent. And I went to the then Dean, Professor Sandra Dawson, and I said, look, I think I've got a different idea for you. Can I test it? This was after reflection over about a week, and I would say 2 very hot showers. I went back and said, what I would like to do is to become director for Centre for Entrepreneurial Learning, because you can't teach the stuff to anybody that doesn't want to learn it. Right? It's just not possible. It also gives a method to shift from about entrepreneurship to for entrepreneurship. It was also important to me. And the other thing is, what will we do? Because we're so early in the ecosystem of education here at Cambridge, we would describe it as spreading the spirit of enterprise. And underneath that vision statement, we have a suite of programs that we will develop, which can take people through a journey that they want to make. We are forever going to be only a small, tiny fragment of somebody's journey. We're never going to be a dominant part. Let's recognize that and then help them through the various inflection points in the journey from not being an entrepreneur to maybe becoming one, or embracing the idea. And so that was the background to it. And she happily agreed. We had the launch event and lovely glass of champagne and things like that, and in front of the building of the Judge. But I also made a decision at that time, for better or for worse, that I wanted the CFEL, Centre for Entrepreneurial Learning, offices not inside the Judge building, but outside the building. Maybe a bit like a spot on the nose, or just there. You can see it. It's not quite ours. I'm not quite sure what to do. The reason was I wanted to be able to reach out into the university.
Right.
And I felt if we were housed inside, I would become normalized to being inside a business school and not being part of a university.
Interesting. And did that also, was part of that thinking also to get to make it easier to forge relationships with the local companies and startups that are in the city centre?
That was an entire thing. So our model was that we understood, getting a bit jargony here with the pedagogy and the curricula and all this sort of stuff. We knew what was needed at the different stages, inflection points of learning. But what we would do is have those delivered by people who have been there and done it.
Yeah.
So my job and the job of my team was to make sure we briefed our speakers thoroughly on what was required, what the learning requirements were for every session, and that then we replicated that.
In many ways, it was like building a startup, right? You were starting small. It looks like things grew quickly. Yeah, it developed into a postgraduate diploma at Cambridge. And it was interesting because you also talk about making sure that the teaching model was scalable, just exactly the same kind of challenge that a startup might face. So talk us through how you approached that then. And what was it like leading that cultural change and just changing people's opinion that this stuff was vital?
Well, what I'd learned in my previous time at Cranfield and also at Nottingham and so on is to engage with the students primarily. That's why we're there. Don't worry about the faculty and the admin and all the rest of it. We'll figure that out, right? Because there's always a reason to say no, this won't work or that won't work. I mean, that was what I was told right at the beginning, actually, by two quite senior people, that the model I was proposing wouldn't work. And I was told that more than once, at Cambridge and at Cranfield. And in both cases, it's worked extremely well because we're serving the needs of the students. And that was the primary objective. So we started off by lots of experiments for 2 years, between 2003 and 5. We ran 30, 40 different types of programs, which are all now, I believe, called hackathons and things like that. Startup weekends and a variety of models were tried and tested. There was speaker series, and we changed that to something called Enterprise Tuesday, which became a major flagship for connecting the university. And I'm very sad to see that's still not still running, because it had a massive role to play. That started off with 12 students in the classroom at Mill Lane Lecture Theatres. 2 speakers were Herman and myself, the first ever lecture. That grew to about 400 people attending the tail end of my tenure at Cambridge. We ran them in the engineering department. And the reason that the scalable model was making sure that we taught the same basic topics year after year after year, but delivered by different people. And in order to get people into the room on time for a 6 p.m. sharp start, we used to play music for about an hour. I think it's the late DJ Skunk, wonderful chap, who put some world music together for me. 1 hour CDs, and we used to play that from 5 till 6. It created an atmosphere, so people would come in, carry on their work, waiting for the lecture to start at 6 o'clock. They would get going, and 7 o'clock precisely I would stop it. Then we had the inevitable baguettes and sandwiches and crisps and what have you. And we managed to get some sponsorship from Lord Karan Billemoria's company, Cobra Beer. And so the undergrads would turn up at 7 o'clock for the beer. And the postgrads would have been stayed all evening. And lots of network would happen as a result of that. And people would stay on till about 8:30, 9 o'clock talking. And I'm aware that many, many startups actually were born during those networking events. They're just a stimulus. And that was a fantastic, vibrant. So the people from Cambridge and the students were both targeted as audiences. And they would hear each other's questions. And the whole thing was done in a well-humoured, positive atmosphere. And that was, I think, the inspiration bit of the journey for people, awareness raising.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just listening to you describe that. Again, the parallels to how you would approach a startup, right? You know, the founder being resilient, not taking no for an answer, finding their way around roadblocks, right? Yeah. Understanding your customer. In your situation, being student-focused and student-led. Totally. These are all the things, you know, building a network. These are all the kinds of things that you would
and the value proposition. What do you want to learn at this moment?
Exactly. So, I mean, you know, we're kind of 20 years on, which is kind of scary, but we're 20 years on from those heady days, I guess. So you must look back on those foundations with a real sense of pride when you look now how much variety and how much support is out there now in the university for entrepreneurship.
It is absolutely fantastic, James, to see that. And as you say, you know, it's moved on. I feel that some of the elements of what we started back then continue. Some of the alumni from our programs are now running those things. And the thread, the spirit of enterprise, if you like, the vision, spreading the spirit of enterprise, that's taken on another level. It's a steroidal level now with founders and Cambridge Enterprise and all the other things going on. The only health warning I would provide on that, being the academic leaking out in this conversation now, is that events are not a substitute for learning. And there are a lot of events, which is fantastic. But I don't see clear structures in those events. They are events, and they're going down technical routes like AI, the usual fashionable routes, buzzing, energy intensive, fabulous. But what's a sustained learning for the individual when they go on from it? We have that for a few weeks, few months at best, maybe a whole year, and then they're gone. And what stayed with them when they've gone on, moved on?
Yeah.
We will have our metrics. Oh, we have so much success. We had so many startups. We put so much money in, da-di-da-di-da. But what's the long-term impact on our customer that came to us trusting that they're coming to us for the best?
With this, that might be your answer, but my kind of question before we move on to the next section of the conversation was, when you look back, we've obviously achieved a huge amount, and this answer doesn't need to be specific to Cambridge, it could be the UK in general, but what do you think is missing? What should we be focusing on to ensure that we are building that kind of platform to enable the UK to take a global lead in entrepreneurship?
Okay, so there's probably two major elements that come to mind. And I'm so happy that some of it is being addressed at Cambridge, to be honest, which is that the entire discussion around scale-ups has overtaken policymakers and financial institutions and so forth, right? Therefore, the money has, I would say, hemorrhaged out of startups into scale-ups. And it's all very fashionable, and it's all where the money is. That's not where entrepreneurship is happening in scale-ups. That's where formalization is happening. That's absolutely right that happens. But any scale-up that is currently looking for money had its ideas 5 to 8 years ago, right? And if we're not funding that in 5 to 8 years' time, where are we going to get the really thoroughbred, high-tech, deep-tech companies coming from? I pose that as a question. So what's missing? I think what's missing is that nurturing of the early stage startup with the type of funds that are required at that early stages, going beyond grants. I don't know how busy the business angels are these days, but I feel that all of them have drifted up towards the more established, de-risked stage away from the early stuff. I think that's missing. The second thing is that the industrial strategies / discussions again go on about technology. They don't go about solving problems. So it looks like we've left the UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, behind. We're not solving big problems of today. That is what we need. We're getting enamored by the fizzy-wizzy tech stuff that's going on around us, whether it's AI or crypto or photonics or whatever it is. That gets us excited.
I'd be interested in your opinion on the pre-university age group and the approach to entrepreneurship. So on the podcast over the last couple of years, this conversation's cropped up a number of times. And I think, what are we doing, or what could we do to make entrepreneurship the kind of career path that someone at a pre-university stage of their life might take seriously? Because it seems to me that education is still geared around traditional career paths, right? And very much going to get a job rather than maybe starting your own company. And it feels like the pop culture references that people might latch onto are getting quite dated now. It used to be Richard Branson, it might have been Dyson, it might be Dragon's Den and people like Alan Sugar, but I've had a rant before about how toxic I think The Apprentice is as a TV show. Whereas conversely, probably a lot of people, younger people, would know who the CEO of Tesla is or the CEO of Facebook is. So where are the UK equivalents? So what's your opinion on that? What do we need to do at that younger age to make this a kind of aspirational thing?
Well, that's a great question. I can remember some years ago being invited to an award ceremony in Birmingham. And just before I went, I was in a meeting with Professor Sir Tom Blundell, who's head of biochemistry in Cambridge at that time, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He was telling me those are the early days of the startup of Aztecs Therapeutics, right? And this was blowing my mind. I couldn't quite get my head around fragmented drug discovery, as being described by a professor in biochemistry. And I was giving him a stick about entrepreneurship, and he was up for it. And I was listening to him, and the other two things that happened at that time, he was on the phone when I got to him. He was helping his daughter on the phone with some A-level or O-level or whatever questions that she was facing. I discovered then they played a musical instrument, which my mother used to play, the veena. how is this professor doing this stuff? What sort of polymath is he? And then, of course, because I was living in Cambridge and doing all this stuff with entrepreneurship, I saw these incredible role models around me, right? And they're not known. Who knows about Andy Hopper and his contributions to the microchip, or all of these other names that we know about, Sophie Wilson, and listen, all the people you and I know about, James, nobody outside of Cambridge really knows about, right? And I hurtled up the A14, went up to Birmingham, and there was all this cloud burst of noise and lights and so on. The award ceremony was being presented. And that year, the winner was Michelle Mone of Bravissimo. I remember of, unfortunately, controversy many years later around clothing and stuff. And I thought, what was really innovative about what Michelle Mone had done compared to the stuff that I had just come out of a meeting from, right? And so we don't celebrate individual, successful, entrepreneurial professors. And I think that is the job for the media to take on. It's probably what led me to the chip story, which we'll talk about in due course.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can use these professors' insights and their reputations and their contributions more effectively, we would provide more role models. And Chris Lowe is another one, right? Professor Chris Lowe. I mean, he's full of fast cars and all sorts. And they all have a good time. They're all wealthy professors, right? They're done well. They fly airplanes to New Zealand, all sorts of things like that. They're cool guys in their own way. They play guitars and God knows what. They play a rock band. Simon Baron Cohen, who is in Trinity, head of Autism Research Center, he's the bass player in a blues jazz band, for instance. And all of these sort of stories are just not getting out enough on personalities. And they are the role models for the future. We need that sort of Trojan horse approach to say, if you do science well, if you work hard and think about these things, you could, if you wanted to follow this pathway, rather than becoming an influencer for hot lips or handbags or whatever the rage is now, or a gamer or something. I mean, my grandson was saying he wants to become an influencer. He's 7 years old when he said that to me. Oh my God.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. But
there is so much to be done, James. It's a great question, though, I have to say. I don't know I gave you a good enough answer, but if I have to leave one sentence, it is, let's make our successful entrepreneurial professors into role models and heroes.
We should definitely start by trying to get some of them onto the podcast. We'll take that as an action. Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, so let's segue. I'm sure the academic world will interweave with the rest of the conversation, but as well as the academic side of your career, you've actually been an active entrepreneur yourself, and you've got a very impressive list of companies that you've founded, advised, sat on the board of. So you've had a lot of hands-on practical experience. So it's probably going to be hard to summarize all of that quickly, but can you pick on some kind of little anecdotes or some insights that you think might be insightful for the listeners?
I guess a failure is always a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
To start with. So picking up on the PhD of one of my students, we decided to launch a company on how to form entrepreneurial teams using a bit of software, right? And back when we started it, we were waving our arms around in circles. It's now called artificial intelligence and machine learning. But back then we didn't have words for it. And we didn't know how to do that. And we were enamored by a chap who turned up, said he would put some money in, become the CEO and drive it forward. He was from a bank, etc., etc. That was an unmitigated disaster for us. That was definitely a second MBA in my career. And what it was, because he was coming from large corporate. He did not understand what it was to be an entrepreneur or to be entrepreneurial, right? And we ended up having to close that business. But by that time, we'd raised about 500K from various people. And I think trusting brands. So we went to two. One was a mathematical software guy, and the other was a software guy who'd done maths up at Edinburgh. And we thought they could build a platform for us, but we didn't know what we were building, right? And we did not have enough money to finish the project. So that was an unmitigated disaster for us. And I think the two lessons from there was, beware who wants to approach you to become your CEO or become anything in your company. Team building big lesson for me. And secondly, do your due diligence on really deeply understanding the vendors that you're going to, because not everybody. So when you're entrepreneurial, you're living in the strategy of hope rather than a hope of strategy. And in that case, and optimistic and so on, you make so many stupid mistakes at that point. Not that I've stopped making those mistakes, but that's what I would say. Avoid those if you can. From that.
Today, how are you splitting your time? Have you got a kind of portfolio of directorships and board seats, all that kind of stuff? What does that kind of portfolio career look like?
So the flip side of the disaster that I had those years ago is the success that I'm enjoying now in seeing a company called Corrosion Radar. They're up at the Future Business Center. We managed to bring 3 of them together with an idea. I managed to introduce Richard Green to become chairman of that, because I knew I couldn't be chairman or anything. He has then worked with the founding team. That's absolutely awesome, and hopefully one day you get to speak to them as well. And they looked at a particular problem called corrosion under insulation. When it was first pitched to me, actually at Cranfield, I thought, well, this is ridiculous. But actually, when I heard that there's something like 700 oil refineries around the world, this could be a big business. And indeed, now they've employed 25, 30 people. They're making sales to the world's biggest companies like Aramco and so on and so forth. And I think it's set to grow into success. Happily, I put some money in there as well, tiny amount compared to what's needed, but I have a stake in that company and I'm non-exec there. And I do my bit to try and meld the senior team, and there's the odd rumble I'm in there to try and iron things out. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to see that team growing from strength to strength. And it is the team again, which is the difference. That's one element. The second thing is that I started off as a mentor in a company called Terra Waste. Bit by bit, through a series of incidents and accidents, I've taken on the role of CEO of that company. And that's a really big task. That's what I mean about solving a big problem. And the big problem we're tackling is waste plastic. And the solution we're trying to bring to it is superheated water and high pressure, which breaks waste plastic back to an oil or near status of oil, which can go back into recycling to manufacturing plastics. So we're trying to bit by bit take away virgin oil from the plastics industry with our approach. We're taking head on the incumbent technology called pyrolysis, which we think is like, if you're of that generation, it is be the Betamax and we're the VHS. If your current generation, it's the USB versus a cloud server. So we're making a generational change. Not easy to do. It's taken me about a year to build the team. We now have 6 of us, and I'm really confident that we're now ready with credible engineering capacity to make that thing happen, should we do so. I decided to register that in the Netherlands because I didn't think the UK had a good enough green policy. We wouldn't get the support for it, because the EU has got the Green Deal and so on. So here I'm schlepping back and forth to the Netherlands from time to time to make that company happen.
Interesting. So is it a venture-backed company at this stage?
Yeah, we've got some convertible loan notes in there.
Okay.
We raised about 500,000 or so in those across Europe, actually. And now we're looking to raise about 1.8 and then another 3 on top.
Okay.
And that we think we'll raise that again in the Netherlands and in mainland Europe.
Yeah, interesting, because I asked because I've heard that it's been quite hard to raise money for climate tech in the last 18 months. So yeah,
very hard, very, very, especially the stage we are at the moment. It's a very early stage.
Okay, yeah, interesting. We'll definitely keep in touch on that. Maybe you can come back on and keep us posted on the show. Okay, I mean, wow, we've covered a lot of ground there. Does it feel like this is your life or something? Or
well, some of it anyway. So that's the advantage of having grey hair, James. You get a chance to do a lot of things.
We haven't talked about the car rally stuff yet either. Last time I spoke to you, you were off again for your car rally.
Well, indeed. Well, thank you for raising that. There's two topics on that. There seem to be 2 for everything I want to say today. One is that all the cars are safely on their way.
Right.
In containers. There's 13 of us that are setting off from here. Some of the people you'll know from the Cambridge environment. And the ship, I believe, is currently in Tangier on its way. We're following it on some kind of ship tracking software, inevitably. And then they reach New Delhi, the customs depot, sometime late October. We then get our cars and then we drive around the Himalayas for 10 days with some regularity events tied in. And then the cars are ship back. We all fly back in different ways, and then hopefully we'll have had a good time. But we're tying that in with raising money for Cancer Research UK as well.
Okay, fantastic.
I can give a shout out to that.
Yeah.
So we remember our dear friends like Peter Cowley and others. And so while we're having a good time, we're saying we're also thinking about these guys. And all of us in our families have had some encounter with cancer. So we thought, why don't we raise some money? And Sherry Kutu and Richard Green were in conversation about this. And so we said, yeah. So we've got a little website connection going to fund it. Our target is to raise 10,000. I think we're about halfway there at the moment.
Well, make sure you send me the link and I'll pop that into the show notes.
I'll do that. Thank you very much, James. That's very kind.
And right at the beginning of the conversation, we mentioned obviously the CHIP project, which is the Cambridge History of Innovation project. So what's been the progress since we came down to the launch event in December last year?
Yeah, the team has collected, particularly Peter Rees, who's now on the County Council for Green Party, by the way, which is wonderful for the Greens, for Newnham and for Peter. It's a good news for everybody. He has managed to collect well over 20 contributions to the archive now, including, for example, Harm, Cambridge Silicon Radio, Solexa and others. Fantastic collection. He's also done some 20-odd oral history interviews where hit the pause button at the moment on collecting more stuff to just dig a little deeper, to then showcase, highlight what we can do with that. What insights are we getting? And I can give you an example of one already, actually, which has been really powerful. And we then need to raise more money for it, inevitably, hopefully in the new year. And it needs to become part of Cambridge's ecosystem, I believe, CHIP, because it will provide the depth of insight needed for promoting Cambridge across to policymakers and others, public engagement, and even to do more research on innovation. Would you like me to give you an example of a kind of insight that's kind of the aha insight that I've had?
Yeah, for sure. And I was also going to ask you, is the home of CHIP going to continue to be at the university library, or is that a funding-related question?
It's a funding-related question, but I hope it continues at the UL because they are the best place to have an archive. And understand how to keep it, how to catalogue it, and so on, and how to give people access to it. I think if it goes off to something else, it'll just get diluted. So, yeah, I think if we're able to raise bit by bit 500,000 or so, I think we can spend the next 5-10 years collecting stuff from all the people around Cambridge and build a solid archive which will tell the story of the last 50, 60 years, just when Cambridge has been on a steroidal growth path.
And it ties back to that previous conversation, doesn't it, about the media doing a better job of showcasing and celebrating entrepreneurship in the UK, right? So we need these kinds of resources to make that happen.
We do, James, and anything we can do to help the library to raise that kind of money, and also to engage with the young talent like Peter Rees and to keep people like that on board, a very important part of what we should be doing.
So if anyone's listening to this and is feeling generous, how do they get involved?
Contact me or contact the team at the UL at Cambridge. I can happily share email details to anyone that's interested and comes back to you, James. Absolutely.
Perfect.
So an example of that would be listening to the oral history of David Kleneman. His repeated comment during the interviews with Peter about the relevance of milestones, externally driven milestones. Now, if you look at any textbook on entrepreneurship or listen to any given talks, I don't think you'll find much on the topic of the importance of milestones and how to manage them. They're there in every business plan, goes to a VC, but nobody talks about the impact, sociological, psychological impact those milestones have on a team and how that can guide team behavior, which then, of course, guides the behavior of the company itself, right? It sounds like such an obvious, simple remark to make, but actually you don't see a chapter on the importance of milestones and how to hit them.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting little insight for educators of the future. I'm busy running my own company now with my own milestones, right? So hopefully somebody will pick this up and go, oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, no,
do something with it.
It's a really worthwhile undertaking. So we hope that you'll get the backing that you need to.
And other insights. So now what I've got is access to those archives because of my relationship with CHIP. And little by little over the weeks, months to come, I hope to to dive deeper and get other insights for myself, and then get the various permissions to go public on attributing properly the sources and so forth. But I also hope that other academics who might be listening to this will say, actually, we'd like to learn a little bit more. Can we get access to the archive? Can we go do some research on innovation? Policymakers come and say to us, hey, what else can we learn from this that will guide our policies for the future on deep tech? Lots of policies on tech and innovation and industrial policies and strategies without really reflecting on with the lens of history or how things did happen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, wow, what a fascinating conversation. We've covered a lot of ground.
Thank you, James.
It's been a pleasure. I look forward to, hopefully I'll see you before you go to the Himalayas, but drive safely when you're there.
Thank you. Yeah, the nice thing about the Himalayas are not quite as many potholes as there are in Cambridge. So I know I'll be safe.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, it's been great. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, James.
Today's show was produced by Carl Homer of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner, Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.